Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for another 5-minute video. For this particular video, I wanted to talk about contradiction. I think it's a topic which not too many tend to get into a discussion about. So I just wanted to cover it really quickly, and I think some people maybe struggle with it because they read certain verses in the Bible and then they would think, well, this is saying the opposite of what that other verse is saying. So, just quickly, a contradiction is when you have two statements and they cannot both be true. And by that, let me give a quick example of something that cannot be a contradiction and one that is a contradiction. If somebody were to ask me, "What is your name?" and I say, "My name is Dumelo," and another one asks me, "What is your name?" and I say, "My name is Tobosi or Mr. Tobosi." Now, there is not a contradiction there because I can go by either of those names. And what it will tend to do is cause that person to look further into my information and figure out if those really are both my names or not. And I would say that's the approach we should all take with the Bible. When we think that there's a contradiction, we should look further into what is entailed with those verses, get more information, and oftentimes you will find that there is no contradiction. And let me just go ahead and say on record that there is no contradiction you can find in the Bible, which if you study, you will be able to find a proper answer. Now, what can be a contradiction is if somebody asks me, "What are you?" and I say, "I'm a man." And then somebody else asks me, "What are you?" and then I say, "I'm a woman." I am not a woman, by the way. And in some parts of the world, that may be accepted by people. And all jokes aside, you cannot be both a man and a woman. And I know that some people who may be born a certain way, and this is if we go deeper into the subject, but that fact stands. Even them considered, you cannot be both a man and a woman at the same time. Now, I looked up some examples of what some people nowadays might think are contradictions, and I will honestly say I was a little bit disappointed with what I found, because a lot of it consists of, and if you remember, we've spoken about context in an earlier video. A lot of it is because people ignore the context of what is in the Bible, and by that I mean they go into one chapter of the Bible, of a book in the Bible, and they take one verse out of an entire chapter, and then they compare it to another verse and they say, "Well, there we go, contradiction." But that is not how the Bible should be treated. You cannot take one thing I said out of an entire sentence and then you go and make it mean something else. You are not telling the truth about what I was saying, because you are ignoring everything else I had said. So that is where context comes in. You cannot just take one thing and say it means something else. You must take it in light of everything that I was talking about. Another one is because nowadays we have people who basically hate God, they hate the Bible, so they come already with a mindset or an idea of the Bible is full of contradictions. And oftentimes, the contradictions they point out are already something they were given by somebody else, and they really didn't take the time to look at them. Because I'm telling you, you take two verses which are given as contradictions, you study them, you will find that there is no contradiction. And that is why I can say they did not study. And I'll give you two examples right now. One which is put alongside another. James 1:13 is put alongside Genesis 22 verse 1. This one is where in James it says that God is not tempted, neither does he tempt man with evil. And then in Genesis 22:1 it says that God tempted Abraham. Now, the basis of temptation, especially if we consider that the devil does that all the time with men, The basis of temptation is to try and get somebody to do something that he should not do. So, was God trying to actually get Abraham to kill Isaac? No. If we read the entire account, we'll see that God was actually testing Abraham. He was not trying to actually get him to kill him. So let's start with that right there. God was not tempting Abraham in that sense of tempting him. It's actually because of the translation of the King James, but he was testing him. If you read the entire account, you do not have to take my word for it. Read the entire account, and you'll understand that God was testing Abraham. So that should clear up that one. And then the other one that's given is Ezekiel 18:20, that is placed alongside Exodus 20 verse 5. I must also mention this was probably taken out of the King James, because other versions word this differently, and I'll show this to you just now. In Ezekiel 18:20, it says, "The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son." And that is how it reads in the King James. Now, I have a new King James here. Let me just go through the other verse really quickly, and then I'll read that to you. Exodus 20 verse 5 says, "God visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children." And that is put as a contradiction. Okay, Ezekiel 18:20, God does not visit the iniquity of the children upon the fathers. New King James reads, "The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son." So those words, the guilt, they're replacing iniquity. And iniquity is basically when you cross the line of what God has said. For example, he says, "Thou shalt not kill," and then you go and kill. You have crossed the line there, and so you are guilty. Or he says, "Thou shalt not steal," and then you go and steal. You have crossed the line and you are guilty. Now, oftentimes, when God punishes man for something he has done, the effects of that punishment will often affect people who come after him, and by that I mean his children down the line. His children and his children's children and those children's children may be affected by the effects of that punishment. For example, somebody might get exiled out of the country. That will affect his generations to come. Or the examples I gave earlier, if I go and kill somebody, then my children, when they are born, I'll be in jail, and that will affect them in their social life. It will also affect their grandchildren in their social life, in that, well, your granddaddy was a killer, you know. So that is basically what those verses are talking about. When he visits that iniquity, you are suffering for, those are the effects of something somebody did. It is not because God is holding you responsible, but it's because the effects of the punishment are affecting you as well. Now, I hope that was wholesome for you, and it will help you to grow and to understand the Bible better. If there is anything you need to be explained further than that, please post in the comments, and I will give you my contacts, or I'll provide further information. And I hope you have a very good week and enjoy your Bible study. Thank you.